So Iannis Xenakis, born exactly 100 years ago in 1922. So today is the 29th of May, 2022, and Iannis Xenakis was born exactly 100 years ago. Let's read a little bit about him. First, let's look at him. His right side of his face was always the one that is made public, because the disfigured part of his face is on the left. You can find on YouTube interesting interviews with him. He became a celebrity because mainly because of his musical compositions and his impact on music in the second half of the 20th century. It would have been nice if we had the occasion now to listen to some fragments of his music. Unfortunately, I noticed that when I play music, Zoom plus, let's say, YouTube, recording, they don't make a good marriage, and you can hear it very well. But you can do it yourself at home, and it's worth it, because he was indeed a formidable composer who was able to transform, some talk about the miracle Xenakis, or the magician, the magical Xenakis, because he was able to, using numbers, using mathematics, using the computer, to create a very emotional music. And this is not a little thing. It's very possible that some of that anger from his early age, again, perhaps because his mother died, then the social injustices he noticed in Greece and so on, he channeled creatively, working with Le Corbusier and alone, and also in his music. So let's read Iannis Xenakis, also spelled with a Y, pronounced, yes, Iannis Xenakis, as you see, born the May 29th, 1922, and died on the 4th of February, 2001. Was a Greek-French composer. I mean, exactly about this, I was trying to verbalize a little bit. Was a Greek-French composer. Come on, he was born. I mean, you could say I'm nationalistic now, or too much of a Romanian or patriotic, but it's not a fair presentation. The man was born and grew up in Romania until 10. This should have been mentioned. It's not mentioned. He was a Greek-French composer who fell from the sky at the age of 10, somewhere in Greece, right? Okay, a composer, a music theorist, an architect, performance director, an engineer. Not bad. In terms of formal training, we could start reading from right to left. He was an engineer, and then he became the other things. I don't know if in this little text is mentioned his illegal activities that place him on a list with those condemned to death. Maybe it is, but I am not lying. You can verify. There are many informations about this. After 1947, he fled Greece. Why did he flee Greece? Well, because otherwise he might have died, killed by the authorities of Greece, becoming a naturalized citizen of France. Xenakis pioneered the use of mathematical models in music, such as applications of set theory, stochastic processes, and game theory, and was also an important influence on the development of electronic and computer music. Bravo to him. He integrated music with architecture, designing music for pre-existing spaces, and designing spaces to be integrated with specific music compositions and performance. In other words, he was an avant-garde man, an avant-garde artist. He loved the new. Among his most important works in music are Metastasis, 1953-1954 for orchestra, which introduced independent parts of every musician of the orchestra, percussion works as Sappha and Pleiades, 1979, compositions that introduce specialization by dispersing musicians among the audience, such as Torch, electronic works created using Xenakis UPIC system, and the massive multimedia performances Xenakis called polytopes, that were a summa of his interests and skills. Among the numerous theoretical writings he authored, the book Formalized Music, Thought and Mathematics in Composition, French edition 1963, English translation 1971, is regarded as one of his most important. As an architect, Xenakis is primarily known for his early work under Le Corbusier, the Sainte-Marie de la Tourette, on which the two architects collaborated, and the Philips Pavilion at the Expo 58, which Xenakis designed by himself. And I will add here, that very work is on the cover of the book with 100 years of modern architecture. Now, try to understand, of all the many architectural works accomplished in 100 years of modernity, of all those works, the one who made that and published that big book chose the work designed by Iannis Xenakis as some kind of a symbol of 100 years of modernity. This is not a little thing at all. So let's wish him happy birthday on this day of his centennial. And I will reiterate that his social political activities should also be scrutinized and known, because it's not very common for an architect to be engaged at that level of risk and danger in political activities and social activities. I am sorry to say it, but often architects are cowards, including Le Corbusier. By the way, Le Corbusier had a fight with his cousin Pierre Jeanneret, because Le Corbusier was sympathetic with the Vichy government in France, which was sympathetic towards the Nazis. And Pierre rejected that, and for a number of years they didn't talk, although they were partners and they ran a business together. I, with all due respect and affection and love for Le Corbusier, in this respect, I respect more Pierre Jeanneret, his cousin, a lesser known architect, although not an unremarkable architect, but who had the more just, more appropriate positioning of himself in the field of politics. So again, I don't think there are many architects who assumed the dangers of fighting for justice, for fighting a cause physically, risking his life, being condemned to death. I don't think there are too many artists or architects, maybe artists more, but architects, no. I regret to say it, but architects usually, in my knowledge, are rather cowards. And Le Corbusier was a coward. Why? Because architects flirt with the power, with those in power. They need the clients, they need their money to build their dreams, and they give up their ideas. I mean, even Louis Kahn, who was himself kind of a radical man, at least in the field of architecture, and very intense and original and so on. But Louis Kahn said that, if an artist needs or wants to protest war, he can paint the wheels of the war machine square, in this way making the war machine unable to function, but that the architect must make them round. And again, with all my affection for Louis Kahn, I disagree with him. I think in the case of a war, the architect should also attempt to make the wheels of the war machine square. But in a way, Kahn said the truth. The architect often is in a relationship of complicity with those in power, with with those who win the war, so to speak. This was not the case of Iannis Xenakis, and we can double our affection for him just for this. I don't know, I have some images here. This might not have been made by him, some artwork or some kind of a project inspired by his works. At first, I just show some images that I found, kind of an aide-memoire of visualizations relating to him. This sketch was done by him, actually. This is a musical score. They are very beautiful graphically, just like the works of John Cage. I love these modernists in music. They create original, interesting music, but also the graphic the graphic aspect of the musical sheets are also very engaging visually, graphically. I don't know what you think, those of you who are here, but I have a great appetite for the new. We need the new, otherwise we die of boredom. And someone like Iannis Xenakis, he was creating new worlds in his imagination, in his longings, in his working for Le Corbusier, and also in working, look, here he's an utopian urbanist, if you want. What I regret there aren't here 2000s Romanian students. I am mainly concerned with them. To see the example of a man who never studied architecture, but who dreamt of another world, a better world perhaps. He had imagination, and he had a desire to express himself in terms of space, also in terms of time. Maybe Vito Acconci was right. Architecture is not about space, it's about time. And music is also intimately related to time. This was a very sophisticated man, trained as an engineer, knowing mathematics, doing music, fantastic music, a music that is, I should shut up and we should listen to his music, but this is not possible if I emit the music from my laptop. And look again, this is again a musical score. It's abstract, it's lyrical, it's incomprehensible for the non-connoisseur. But for the one who has a little bit of sensitivity, I think it's very intriguing and even beautiful. This was a thinking man, a man who thought with numbers, thought through numbers, but aspired towards music. That's why I launched a competition to which I'm sure no one will participate, a house for Eupalinos. Eupalinos, the one that Paul Valéry, the great French poet, thought is the name of the architect, the paradigmatic architect, the architect, the only one that deserves the name to be called an architect. Why? I repeat myself, I repeat what Paul Valéry said, but maybe certain things should be repeated. Because Paul Valéry, who was not an architect, was a poet, but he was interested about the phenomenon called architecture. He asked himself, what is an architect? Who is an architect? Of course, he didn't say he's the one who graduated from an architecture school and has a diploma or 2 or 3 or 4. No, he said like this, there are 3 kinds of builders. There is a builder who places a stone above another stone, and he's a builder. Then there is a builder who places a stone above another stone and makes them talk. He's a master builder. And then the third one places a stone above another stone and makes them sing. His name is Eupalinos ou l'architecte, or the architect. Now, how many of us today think about creating buildings that sing? I don't think too many. There are a few, but not too many, because we are not even encouraged, by the education, by society, by anything. No one talks about singing buildings. But I still think Paul Valéry was right. This is a building actually he built, the Polytope Beaubourg, and it was built or placed in front of Centre Georges Pompidou in Paris, and you are going to see it. Look at it. It looks crazily innovative, even by today's standards. And it was built by this man without any training in architecture, condemned to death in Greece, and who studied Greece, and who also composed very esoteric music. Look at this. What is this? This almost reminds me of a graphic work by Botticelli, for Dante's work, an illustration. I think it's beautiful. I don't know what it is. It's probably some kind of another visual representation of some music that he composed or he wanted to compose. This meeting between music, which has to do with sound, and visuality, is very interesting. This man, who had only one functioning eye, was very intensely involved with visual aspects of life. And then I don't think it is an accident, and I don't think it is an error that this building made it on the cover of that book with 100 years of modern architecture or architecture. Now, it is an incredible building, and I bleed because it was destroyed. This should not have been destroyed. But there were other great buildings built for ephemeral, world exhibitions that were destroyed, unfortunately. Let's not forget the Glass Pavilion by Bruno Taut, or even the building built by Gropius and Adolf Meyer, part of the same Werkbund exhibition in 1914 in Cologne or Köln, or Van der Velde building also in Köln. It's very sad, humanity I'm very sorry, but sometimes the words Homo sapiens do not apply adequately to what human beings do. They invest creativity, intelligence, money, effort, time in building interesting, valuable structures and things, and then they destroy them a few months later or a few years later at the most. The Crystal Palace, right, in Great Britain, well, Paxton's masterpiece, was destroyed, and I can give countless examples. This is one of them, but it was a remarkable work, and it is still a remarkable work that inspires, because it is free. It is literally, it almost looks like an irrational creation, but it's conceived mathematically very, very, very rigorously. So this meeting between order and disorder finds in this structure, in this pavilion, a perfect example. He also contributed to music here, for this, because inside it was projected a film, and you can see this film on YouTube. Was made by Varese, the French composer, Xenakis, and Le Corbusier. And of course, Le Corbusier couldn't miss the occasion to include many references to, well, though some of them somehow oblique to his work, because architects are very good at this, to never forget their ego. But it's worth seeing that again, so-called avant-garde film that was projected on the surfaces of this unusual structure or unusual building. I hope I will arrive later at images of this work. A tribute to Iannis Xenakis. This is a musical, festival. He's very, very highly valued in the field of music, and this year, because it is his centennial, Greece launched a competition for compositions paying homage to him under the event or in the event called Meta Xenakis. And that's the reason why I asked myself if we cannot create an event called Meta Xenakis 2 in architecture, or a meta architecture. First of all, what could that be? Because the architect, unfortunately, is not encouraged to think in such terms. You know, we are conditioned, I understand, by matter and so on, but the spirit of architecture is on a different plane than you know, often the trivialities of prosaic life, I think. And so what do we see here? The Philips Pavilion, shape, space, and sound, building based around the projection of Varese's poem Electronique. I read that also Xenakis contributed now, maybe with a different piece, musical piece. But Varese indeed made this poem Electronique, and then there was the I'm sure it wasn't Varese who directed the visuality, the visual parts of the film, because it is a film. I saw it, and it's good. It's so freshly modern somehow. You know, yes, I am nostalgic. I am nostalgic towards all the forms of modernity. This was not so old, actually. 1958 was not from the beginning of the 20th century. Anyway, another, well, in essence, I think every artist and every architect and every writer and every musician and every, you name them, try to unite the opposites, order with disorder. And I think Xenakis tried to do the same thing in music and in architecture too. Unfortunately, I don't have here, and I should have had here, and I'm angry at myself that I don't, images of La Tourette, because I know certain parts where it is known that he contributed explicitly to the building by Le Corbusier. There are some parts of the building where Xenakis was the author or the co-author. And look at this drawing. This is certainly not the drawing of someone who studied architecture and who had to pass an entrance examination to enter the School of Architecture. This is certainly not a man who, you know, received tutoring in, you know, about the gimmicks to get into an architecture school. He drew like he felt. Look at that tree. Look at this is, and I love the drawing. It's like the drawings of Lina Bobardi, you know, very almost naive, almost childlike, but he was a very sophisticated intellectual and artist. Great artists are like this. They don't move in the direction of the prescribed little dogma with which you trick reality in order to get into a school, in order to be bored there for a number of years, in order to get a diploma and then lead an insignificant life for the rest of your life. Now, these are people who didn't play games with their lives, and good for them, like Iannis Xenakis, you know. While we still struggle with the T-square and the rectangle, look at this crazy musician, you know, what shapes he was dreaming of, and he even built them, because he built this pavilion in front of Centre Georges Pompidou in Paris, and you are going to see it. I love it because there is geometry, there is calculation, you see some numbers there, but then you see here, you know, something that you think has no reason, no rigor, no numbers. It's literally that the difficult conjunction between the measurable and the immeasurable. Look at this. You know, it's architecture. It's written. You know, it's handwritten. I find it very beautiful and very uplifting. You know, this is art. This is architecture. This is a creation. You know, where you break off from timidity and restrictions and dogmas. Of course, again, he used numbers. This man was a mathematician. He knew mathematics very well, but he used the numbers in order to sing. Hello, Mr. Xenakis. Happy birthday. And I understand why a probably famous French writer, she fell in love with him and they got married. His wife was a French writer. I think he was a beautiful man. Only the timid one would think that he was not beautiful because his left part of his face was disfigured by the Second World War. This man transcended the misery of that suffering, and he almost died then, from what I read. And he took revenge through his art and his architecture and his music on suffering, essentially. He did it. Bravo to him. Music and Architecture by Iannis Xenakis. Translated, compiled, and presented by music is not a language. Any musical piece is akin to a boulder with complex forms, with striations and engraved designs atop and within, which man can decipher in 1,000 different ways without ever finding the right answer or the best one. The man born in Brăila. And this is the polytope that he built, in fact, on the other side of the open space in front of Boburg, the other end being, kind of funny, no? The man born in Hobița had a museum for him built by Renzo Piano, unfortunately in an uninspired way, in my opinion. And then the man born in Brăila built this, in my opinion, much more interesting structure than one Renzo Piano built. I'm almost inclined to say that also, of course, Renzo Piano built some good buildings in his life and continues to build, maybe too many. I regret, of course, a lot that he built the Palais de Justice in Paris, which doesn't do any justice to the city of Paris. Is a building which I hope one day might be brought down, because it's so ungraceful and so huge and so tall and so domineering and so without poetry. I just don't believe it that Paris built it. But Herzog and de Meuron will soon build their triangular pyramid even taller. So I guess Paris is open to all kinds of, from my point of view, foolish megalomanias. Anyway, but this building, which does not exist, but it should have existed for a longer time, was built by Iannis Xenakis. Again, another picture of this. Look at this, I mean, this was done before parametric design, before, half a century earlier, almost. Yeah, I think in the early 1970s, and was done by a man without any training in architecture, but a man who loved architecture. And I don't know if he read the little book by Paul Valéry, Eupalino sul Architect, but he didn't have to read it because he lived it. Look at this. Is it a bad building? If this building was built today in Milan or in Shenzhen or in Beijing or who knows where, it would be considered striking. But you see from the van in front of it, what is its age? This is close to 1960s now. That kind of van the hippies used. It was probably some kind of an old Volkswagen. At that time was not old, of course. But the building is so freshly new and astonishing in its unexpectedness. Bravo to Iannis Xenakis. I regret I was not born in Brăila. Here he is, I mean, not his building, Polytop, with a building by Renzo Piano and Richard Rogers, and he is forgotten most of the time, Peter Rice, the engineer genius, or the genius engineer, who died very young at 42, I think, a great engineer, Peter Rice. He was instrumental to build this building. It's hard not to be emotional when I look at such a picture, you know. I mean, again, the man who created this at one moment was a little kid in Braila. And if the picture was longer, here on the left, we would have seen the Brâncuș Museum. So I don't know about you. You are, most of you here, Romanians, you know. And yes, I am nostalgic and emotional and patriotic. But here is, here was and is and will be, a man who grew up, was born in a little village called Hobița in Romania. And here, a man who, until 10, was a kid in Braila, in front of the majestic, techno work by Renzo Piano and Richard Rogers and Peter Rice. Bravo again, bravo to art, because this is what art does. It transcends frontiers, not just in space, but also in time. I mean, this pavilion does not exist, but this building exists, and this building exists, and these buildings are dated, while this one is not dated. This building is beyond age. It's atemporal, it's ahistorical, it's highly modern, but it has something of a, it does not belong to a specific time. It's atemporal, it's ahistorical. Hello, Mr. Xenakis. We congratulate you. This is a house he built in Greece, and it's true, when he well, in this case, he was not the client, but I will show also the house he built for himself and his wife, and I think they have a daughter. He built this one for someone, this building in Greece. I like more the works he did when he worked for Le Corbusier but these have qualities too. Here he is in front of La Tourette. I had been here. I visited 2 or 3 times. I even slept one night here. If you didn't visit yet La Tourette, please know that it's very close to Lyon, in the center of France. And from there, you can take a train or a bus, and you can rent a room. You can sleep actually in a cell destined to the monks who live here. They rent rooms. And I have to say about this building, the most impressive sacred space, modern sacred space I saw in my life until now is here. It's the liturgical space, the so-called, the church in a way of this monastery. It's rectangular. I don't know what it is about it. Its proportions, the roughness of, but no, it's not the roughness, because then at Saint-Pierre de Firminy were also this, exposed concrete. It's not about that. It's magical. It's absolutely beautiful. Although unfortunately, I don't have here the plans for this famous building. It's a rectangular space, but its proportions, I guess, and it's something there. I truly felt great emotion when I was inside that space. This work had, Le Corbusier was more of the author of this building than in, let's say, Philip's Pavilion. The building is not executed quite properly. For example, here at the bottom, I saw some big holes, like you would see the foundation of the building it's built rather adventurously somehow. Some people don't like it. I myself, at first, when I saw it there, I wasn't very impressed. because that's not what you expect, you know, when you go to see a monastery. It's more like a proletariat. It's for sacred proletarians, as I would put it. It's a building for sacred proletarians, if there is such a thing. Again, look at this man. He was until 10 living in Brăila. Did he imagine that one day a picture will be taken of him in front of La Tourette? Did he imagine at that time in Brăila that he would become an employee of the famous Le Corbusier? Did he imagine at that time that, you know, he will be placed on a list of those condemned to death in Greece? Did he imagine that he would become a famous composer of electronic music? Probably not. These are, you know, some fragments, some other images of this house that you saw here. Interesting in a way, this one too, the cuts into the walls, you know, the so-called windows, if we can call them so, windows. Let's face it, all of us struggle to give meaning to our lives. All of us, including the banker. The banker thinks that by accumulating wealth, achieves immortality. But the banker, at one point, realizes that all his money means nothing without culture. So then the banker, the possessor of wealth, invests in culture, in art. That's why an art curator here in Romania told me, Dan, you know, artists always talk about money and bankers always talk about art. It's a paradox, but there is some truth here, because we all talk about what we don't have. Artists don't have money usually, and bankers don't have art. So of course they talk about what they don't have. But beyond this, I think is extremely important being gifted now with a certain talent, as I imagine the people here who participate today at this talk have. You know, we are gifted now. We have a talent now for drawing, for imagining things, for working well in space, to manipulate, to work with forms, with shapes, to do architecture. It's beautiful. But how many of us do not forget, you know, do not forget to remain themselves? Because I keep coming across this thought that when Bruce Goff, the famous North American architect, when he was 16 and he wrote to Frank Lloyd Wright and to Louis Sullivan, asking them to give him advice what school to go to, and both of them told them, don't stay away from schools. Louis Sullivan told him, it took me years to forget what I learned in school, while Frank Lloyd Wright told him, Bruce, if you go to school, say goodbye to Bruce Goff. In other words, say goodbye to being yourself. In the case of Iannis Xenakis, he didn't have such difficulties because he didn't have a training in architecture. This maybe shows in this rather pathetic domestic little gate here. Now, I don't know if this is his work or not, or is the client's decision. You know, a so-called educated architect would not accept this kind of, you know, humble, you know, naive gate. The building is not gate. And unfortunately, I'm unhappy because I have seen pictures with this building seen from above. And I'm afraid I don't have that picture here. As I told you, I have various presentations about him, and I'm not sure I chose the most developed. This is the picture I told you about. With Le Corbusier, I think he was 72 years old around the time. So let's say 1958. Le Corbusier was born in 1887. So yeah, 71 years old, kind of like this. And let's see how old was Iannis Xenakis, because that's him there with a serviette with the documents to the Great Pavilion. He must have been born in 1922, so 1958. He was 36 years old, 36. And as I said, you know, it's difficult for me not to remember that these two men together have only two functioning eyes. Le Corbusier, the left eye, functioning, and I mean, you know, they complete each other, so to speak, because in the case of Xenakis, his good eye was the right one, while in the case of Le Corbusier, his good eye was the left one. Anyway, interesting pair. Interesting pair, really. I can look at it and I can imagine all kinds of I don't know, all kinds of thoughts, you know. I'm sure both suffered, you know. Le Corbusier suffered. He said, if you want to bring the new into the world, you have to have the nerves of steel, made of steel. They both suffered. And of course, one of the reasons for suffering was, you know, this infirmity to have, I don't know, it wasn't clear to me in how Le Corbusier managed to destroy the sight of his right eye. I read that at 28, he was painting, I think, in the middle of the night, and something happened. He lost his sight in his right eye. Both men, you know, although they are dressed very decently here, because they came from a business meeting, they were eccentrics in a way, you know. The one on the right, you know, condemned to death by Greece. The one on the left, a great adversary of schools in general and academies in particular. Maybe you know, he fought with the French Academy for many years, and in the end, the French Academy invited him to have a chair, in other words, to be a member of the French Academy, and he refused. You can also look on the web, on the Google images, for a beautiful humoristic drawing by another Romanian, Saul Steinberg, who designed a diploma for Le Corbusier. Very, very beautifully humoristic. And Saul himself studied architecture, and he was born in Bucharest, but studied in Milan. Try to find it, because it's so flamboyantly elaborated, you know. It's like all the, but artistically expressed, you know, all the flowers of bureaucracy on that incredible diploma, you know. It's not the diploma that made Le Corbusier, and it is not the diploma that made the Xenakis. It's the quality of the creative work. That's why we talk about that. And here is the picture I told you about in Rue de Sèvres. This used to be a monastery, and Le Corbusier, who probably struggled with money too, most of his life in various ways, he rented this corridor. It was a corridor on the monastery on Rue de Sèvres, and these were his, you know, partners in crime, so to speak. On the left, and this shows the importance of Iannis Xenakis in his office, because he's right here, you know. I mean, Iannis Xenakis, Le Corbusier, Iannis Xenakis, and then the others, smaller and more frail, more fragile, the most of them being Doshi. Did Doshi at that time, I don't know, this picture was taken, I don't know when, you know, maybe in the 40s, early 50s, considering the age of Le Corbusier. Did he think, Doshi, who never studied architecture, that one day he will get the Pritzker Prize? At that time, the Pritzker Prize didn't exist. You can see that poor Doshi looks very frail in this picture, you know, and I did read that he almost developed ulcer. He was very sick, because Le Corbusier agreed to hire him, but on one condition, that he would accept to work for him without pay. Of course, we can comment on that, but let's move on. I like this picture very much, because essentially life is an adventure, architecture is an adventure, the unexpected is around the corner. We don't know what will happen. We don't know. Maybe one of you will get a Pritzker Prize. Maybe one of you will compose, avant-garde music. Maybe one of you will become a guerrilla fighter, an insurgent fighter for social justice on the streets of Bucharest, or who knows what other city. Who knows? Who knows? But the important thing is to remain true to yourself as much as possible. Of course, we all make compromises. Probably even Le Corbusier made, and I hope he did with the Vichy government, probably Iannis Xenakis too. Does he have a cigarette in his left hand? I think he does. It means Le Corbusier allowed people to smoke in his office? Maybe. Anyway, Iannis Xenakis, born in Brăila, and Le Corbusier, born in a horrid Swiss town that influenced his urbanism. And if you look at images of the town where Le Corbusier was born, you would understand the unfortunate aspects of his urbanism. Because yes, it is important where you are born. You are formed. That's why I say Iannis Xenakis, in 10 years, he wandered through the streets of Brăila. He saw, he was part of that town. He was formed, at least to an extent, in that town, just as I was in Sibiu. And I will always have a medieval side to him because I grew up in the shadow of the evangelical church, or Kirche, in the center of the town. And we are formed. In 10 years, we absorb, a kid absorbs many things. That's why, Xenakis belongs to Romania too. Sorry for being so possessive. Here is another picture with like kids. I mean, look at this 71 years old man, if not 72. Of course, he was not sufficiently polite always. He always kept his hat on, even when he had Dominican monks around him. That is, even inside the quarters. And, playing is this Varese. I don't know who he is, but this is Le Corbusier and this is Xenakis. The man born in Brăila. Very nice. I don't know. I mean, I think we need such mentors. We need such examples, people who didn't play games with lives. I mean, look at this man. He really looks like a nice young man, decent, serious, sensitive, How come he was placed on a list of those condemned to death in Greece? Does he look like a criminal? Not at all to me. Plus, the only crime he committed really was becoming a creator, doing very creative music and very creative architecture. I look again at the Polytop in Paris. This is I'm glad I have this diagram here. I discovered this, how to call it, diagram, this little sketch on the web. Le Corbusier is one circle. Iannis Xenakis, another circle with the same diameter. This is ambitious. And the intersection is Notre Dame du Haut at Ronchamp. What about that? You tell me. If this is a little thing, I don't think I can find any other kind of intersection of two equal circles in terms of their radius intersecting and generating a very famous work itself as being because of the intersection of those two circles, meaning the intersection of two men. I don't know. I don't think Le Corbusier would have loved this little sketch or diagram or whatever. I don't know who made it, but the fact that someone thought of it is very interesting. Also, since we see the Notre Dame du Haut at Ronchamp, I have to say it. I visited it. And I remember when I visited Ronchamp, and of course, every student in architecture or architect knows about Ronchamp, of course, the chapel. But when I entered it and I read the inscriptions, you know, handwritten, kind of a dialogue between the author, Le Corbusier, and Marie. Marie being, of course, the mother of Jesus. But I had a feeling, an uneasy feeling, that there was a strange intimacy. I mean, the way the language was used showed to me a familiarity of relation. The relationship between Le Corbusier and the Marie that he was talking to, that is the mother of Jesus, I felt that the language was somehow too personal, too familiar. I mean, okay, maybe I'm timid, maybe I'm very timid, and I would never imagine talking like this, having an imaginary dialogue with, you know, the mother of Jesus in this way. It's possible. But I had this strange feeling that something is there, a little bit idiosyncratic, a little bit strange. Also strange, if you know, the southern wall at Ronchamp, which is a medieval wall. All the other walls, you know, the other cardinal points are regular with the, you know, regular thickness, but the wall facing the sun is very, very thick. At the base, in some parts, is probably maybe even more than 2 meters thick. And there are those the windows are the wall is pierced. It's literally pierced through those windows placed in an aleatory way on that wall. And I asked myself, because usually the southern wall is the one conducive to beneficial dialogue or relationship with the sun, no, with the sunlight, because that's where the sunlight comes from the south. But in this case, he built a fortress-like wall towards the south. And then, of course, it is penetrated, is pierced by the sun rays through those small windows, on which he inscribed fragments of a dialogue with Marie. What I want to say this, later on, I read that Le Corbusier, and this may be, I mean, now I'm venturing into some kind of ad hoc psychoanalysis, amateur psychoanalysis. Le Corbusier had troubles with his mother all his life. In fact, it might be that all his work is in very good measure the result of that troubled relationship with his mother. Le Corbusier adored his mother, whose name, surprise, surprise, was Marie. He longed for the love of his mother, but he didn't get it. His mother loved his brother, who was a musician. This could also be some kind of interesting relationing to Iannis Xenakis, who became a musician. I guess I don't think Le Corbusier had aptitudes for music. He probably even hated or envied his brother, who was a musician, and his mother loved his brother and not him. And then Le Corbusier tried to become Le Corbusier and become a genius in architecture through formidable works in order to win the affection of his distant mother. Iannis Xenakis, on the other hand, had a mother who also loved music, like the mother of Le Corbusier, but she died young. I think she died in childbirth when Iannis was at the most 4 years old. So here we have two men working together. And I don't know what the name of Iannis Xenakis' mother was, but it's important that the name of Le Corbusier's mother is also Marie, because, and I read something about this, there are people who think that Ronchamp was not built just as an homage to Jesus or Marie, Jesus' mother, but also to his own mother. And maybe this could explain the intimacy of the language that I had the feeling of inside the chapel. The kind of dialogue, the affectionate, personalized dialogue that Le Corbusier had with Marie, for me, had this strange meaning that there might be something more to it, not just a dialogue with the mother of the great Son of God. No, it was something else, something personal. And it's possible that indeed unconsciously, I imagine unconsciously, Le Corbusier, when he built this church, which he initially didn't want to build. I read it initially because he was rather atheistic, Le Corbusier. He was not, he rejected initially the invitation to build a chapel, but there was a special Dominican monk, Couturier, who was a friend of Le Corbusier, but also a friend of Matisse and some important modern painters, abstract painters. He convinced Le Corbusier to build it. Now, if Iannis Xenakis influenced Le Corbusier, we don't know. We don't know. But someone, not me, made this sketch. I found this on the web. And again, now, going kind of, meandering through my thoughts, coming back to that thick wall towards the south that I mentioned, I was, again, venturing in ad hoc, amateurish psychoanalysis. I was thinking that the attraction that Le Corbusier had towards his mother, and he did, in fact, apparently there is a letter that he sent to his mother, which cannot even be published because it is visually rather shocking, not to say lacking a sufficient degree of decency. Apparently, it shows Le Corbusier without too many clothes on him, with the back towards the viewer, but with the face towards his mother, was a letter that he drew, well, he wrote and drew a letter addressed to his mother, but that's not how normally a son writes to his mother, right? So Le Corbusier was a complicated man and with a very complicated eros. If you look for erotical drawings of Le Corbusier on the web, sometimes you might have difficulties to look at them without or making sure that no one else sees you looking at those drawings. Anyway, so that thick wall I thought could represent, the restrictive shield that the son places between himself and the mother. And I don't think, this kind of relationship is truly, referring to the sacred relationship between Jesus and his mother. Now, is it between Le Corbusier and his mother, the other Marie? Anyway, maybe I went too far with this, but it's interesting anyway. It's interesting. Iannis Xenakis, Le Corbusier, Xenakis Centennial, Le Corbusier, Notre Dame du Haut, Étrange, the intersection of two circles, two men having only two eyes together. Look at the plan of the pavilion in the Philips pavilion. It's beautiful. It's an amoeba. Would you say that this was built and it was generated with numbers extremely rigorously? It's much better than in plan. I'm talking about the plan, then a plan that Peter Eisenman designed for the church of the third millennium or the year 2000s that he would have liked to build in Rome, but the jury chose the project sent by his cousin, Richard Meyer, and they built it. Anyway, we saw already this, almost, when you consider that this was not done with the digital technology, with parametrics, it's all you could say this is manual parametry. Here he is in a studio, recording studio. Really, I don't know what you think, but if you are not stirred up or inspired by a man who lived creatively so intensely and in such varied ways. By the way, I saw in an interview with him, he said an architect should always have another job, not just architecture. Just like he had. He was also a very accomplished and dedicated musician. Yes, to have another job in parallel. It probably does good because, architecture has a tendency to become, self-obsessional and, could lead even to some kind of, I don't know how to describe them. I remember that in a text I wrote and I sent to other people, and I mentioned something about incestuous relationship architecture has with itself, or something like this, talking about the thick wall, southern wall at Ronchamp. And Dan Hanganu wrote to me because he got it too. He wanted to receive more details about that statement, and unfortunately, I read that email too late. Maybe that I read it after he died, but I regret now because I should have tried to elaborate. I do think it's good for an architect to do some other things, and maybe for all of us, and not just a violon d'Ingres, like the painter Ingres. He had, he was playing the violin on Sundays. No, to be just like Xenakis here. Let's hope that this photograph was not taken on a Sunday. He took off from Le Corbusier, and he was. Working with computerized music here, and he's older age, an interesting man. This is a picture of the movie inside the Philips Pavilion, which again you can see on YouTube. It's Le Poème électronique de Varese, but I think they contributed, both Le Corbusier and Iannis Xenakis, to it. You can see some references to Le Corbusier's architecture, and there are also images that, seem to fight against war and so on. Again, the building, look, it's huge. I mean, it was huge. Look at the silhouettes, the human silhouettes, they're risking their lives, doing, I don't know exactly what, but the building does deserve, in my opinion, to be on the cover of that book of 100 Years of Modernity. Thank you, Braila, for giving to the world someone like Iannis Xenakis. I don't know what this is. I think was also part of, because inside there was a lot of, innovative, it was a spectacle of sound, color, moving images and so on. But I don't know, because the picture kind of looks more recent, if this was taken then, when the pavilion was built. I think Iannis Xenakis would have agreed with Louis Kahn. A great building begins with the immeasurable, then it goes through the measurable, then in the end it comes back to the immeasurable. And I think all these struggles to bring mathematics, calculations, numbers, towards actually arriving at the immeasurable. I remember what Einstein said, something that I like very much. He said, what counts in life cannot be counted, and what can be counted doesn't count. I guess he said most of the time. I guess he left some space for exceptions. Again, what counts in life cannot be counted, like money, for example. it can be counted, but it doesn't really count. Although when you don't have it, you certainly would not say so. And what does count cannot be counted, like feelings. Can you count feelings? Can you measure them? Can you say I had a feeling which was 1 meter 26 centimeters long? No, no. Unfortunately, many places in the world and many institutions and many schools value too much what can be counted, you know, like grades, you know, grades. But how can you measure the immeasurable, especially in a field so complex like architecture, where you cannot eliminate subjectivity? It's impossible to eliminate subjectivity from architecture. It's absolutely impossible. So those who give grades, you know, with a so-called rigor, pharmaceutical rigor, are simply deluding themselves, because you cannot, again, a Rococo architect would grade a minimalist work with the lowest grade, and a minimalist architect would grade a Rococo project with the lowest grade. So who is right? Evaluations in architecture are unavoidable subjective, and they should remain so, because it's not just mathematics, it's not just mechanics, it's not an equation. Feelings are there, emotions, subjectivities. Xenakis, Philips Pavilion, Brussels. You see, it's his name shown there. It's not Le Corbusier's. This is another picture I found on Google Images. Bravo to him. I don't know what this is. I don't think this is my best presentation on him, but now we cannot start another one. Anyway, this is another image from inside the Philips Pavilion, from that Poème électronique by Varese, but he was a composer, so I think the visual choices were belong to at least Le Corbusier, if not to Iannis Xenakis as well. And look at this, you know, they are magical. You know, these became a building, but they are abstract. But they are abstract, they are fluid, they are configured, they are crystallizations of fluidity based on numbers. And I think this building, the more time passes, the more will be appreciated. It already is. And this is the man, you know, le criminel, the man condemned to death in Greece. An innocent man, most surely, who fought ardently for what he believed in. You know, he was an idealist. And all artists and all writers and all musicians, those who are truly good, and I would include the architects too, do have to have some idealism within. Otherwise, they would not be good. It's as simple as this. And without that idealism, they just become little pawns on the chess table of the world, you know, but not significant figures. And he was a significant figure. I wish I met him. I wish he was alive and we invited him in Sala Freștelor or here on Zoom to talk to us, to tell us about the horrible, horrible crimes he committed in Athens or wherever he did illegal activities. By the way of this, I thought of opening an architecture practice called Office of Disobedient Architecture, OBA, ODA, O-O-D-A, which also is a nice word, because from here to Ode to Joy by Beethoven, Oda means ode in English. But there is already such an office and they do terrible works in the United States called ODA. But I'm very attracted to the idea of a disobedient architecture. In fact, we should have a festival with disobedient architecture. I know when I thought of it, I had great I was breathing better. I think the architect as a disobedient creator could bring something interesting into the world, and the man will talk about not tomorrow but the other day. Zvi Hecker, he actually said, and great art and great architecture cannot wholly be legal, and I would agree with him. I would agree with him, and probably Iannis Xenakis would have agreed with him too. Yeah, what is truly valuable goes beyond the rules and regulations. Maybe not so far as the motto or the logo of SciArc, which says, to hell with regulations, we are going for the unknown. But it's known that art, this is its mission, to search for the unknown. And this man was searching for the unknown in music, in architecture, and even in social political commitments or involvements. I'm curious about that part of his life. We saw this one already, utopian urbanism or cosmic urbanism. Maybe even this is the Polytope built in front of Boburg. This is again the Philips. Now look at the pavilion of Austria, how pathetic it is compared to the one built by Le Corbusier and Iannis Xenakis. And some people think mainly Iannis Xenakis. Isn't it incredible? I think it is. I really, Braila should build a monument to, but not only to him, there are others. I love Dolphy Trost, a very interesting man from Braila. And there are many there. I really don't know what happened there in Braila. In Romania, s-a răsturnat Carol cu Jenny la Brăila. I know, but this building is quite something. It still is, because this is kind of surprising, although that it's still based on reason, because these surfaces are built mathematically. It does give a feeling of almost immeasurable freedom and spontaneity. It's truly, I think, a very balanced work between reason and unreason, freedom and necessity. It's a great work. It really is. And look at the cars. They are beautiful, the cars, but the cars show the year when the building was built, while this building would look fresh and new and what we call modern even 500 years from now. Mr. Musk might even rebuild it on Mars, and it would look okay on Mars as well. Anyway, this is actually symptomatic that cars remain aged. They show their age, like in the drawings of Le Corbusier. The perspectival drawings of Le Corbusier sometimes show cars, but the cars belong to the time when he made the sketches, while the buildings could belong even to the present. It's the same here. The cars belong to the 1950s, and they are beautiful, yes, in a nostalgic way. I like them, but the aesthetics, no one would build such a car these days, while the building is pointing towards the future. This is a project was done by this person, I guess a student, Davis Butner, where there are references to not just Iannis Xenakis, but also Antoni Gaudi, as you can see on the right. What a beautiful conjunction, no? On the left, Iannis Xenakis, on the right, Antoni Gaudi. I so regret I had this idea and I believed in it, but I don't have public connections, public relations. I don't have money, but I thought of launching today or now in the year of the centennial, Xenakis centennial, a Iannis Xenakis Prize. And yes, I thought of launching it in Romania for Romanian young, adventurous, creative architects. And I sent the message to many students, professors, architects. And no one replied. No one. Now, it might be that no one had the work sufficiently creative to, aspire towards getting the. It's true, being a man without a lot of means, I said, we'll offer a prize, the first prize this year, 2022, a vacation for 2 people in Vienna that I was willing to pay with my own money next year, 11 days, a free vacation in Vienna, accommodations, food, and so on. But forget the prize, nobody replied, nobody. Nobody's interested in Iannis Xenakis. Nobody's interested in challenging Iannis Xenakis with a creativity equally audacious and inspiring and provocative and so on. No one. And this depresses me beyond measure. Could it be that we do not have today, in the present, here and now, creative forces that can measure themselves, against someone like Iannis Xenakis? And if we don't, it's very, very, very sad. What Romanian architect would make it on a page created by Davis Butner or who knows else, together with Antoni Gaudi? Well, Iannis Xenakis did. Okay, you could say, all right, it's a capricious bringing together of 2 architects, 2 names. I don't think it's so capricious. He deserves it, at least for that work, but not only that work. It's, I don't know. I see there, I see there, and you see too, Antoni Gaudi and Iannis Xenakis, don't you? And it's his centennial. He was born today 100 years ago. And from a whole country, we couldn't find one single project to measure itself against, so to speak, the works of Iannis Xenakis. No one even replied. No one. Silence. They live modestly, of course. I mean, look at his apartment. Look at his watch also, wristwatch, which is, he probably, I don't know, he created some beautiful things, but he was not, into high fashion or, stylist. Look at those books on top of his library. Kind of like the books in the library of Le Corbusier when he was a young man. And it's really, there is such a picture, and it's a beautiful picture, if you compare the library in the apartment or the house, the apartment of Rem Koolhaas, all aligned and even, brought together in relation with their size, everything ordered. Well, in the library of Le Corbusier is a terrible disorder, just like on the top of Xenakis' library, because these people, I don't know. I mean, they were genuine creators. I mean, yes, okay, I idealize Le Corbusier and I probably idealize Xenakis too. But I think we need such inspirational figures, because I think they are beautiful. They inspire me, and I hope they inspire you too. Fighting with, yes, with problems, with infirmity, with seeing the world with only one eye, with being, on a blacklist of condemned to death, escaping from the prison, studying engineering, and then doing architecture, music, all these things, the adventure of life. Born in Braila. We saw this one. We didn't see this one here. He is with the little girls, maybe, I don't know where, in Japan or somewhere. He believed in the computer. This man would not have believed that in Romania, 30 years after the, more than 30 years actually, that in the year 2022, he will still work with the T-square and the rectangle. This man, this picture was probably taken in the 1960s or early 70s. Half a century ago, that is, and he's pointing towards a computer. Now, it's not about fetishization. He used the computer because he believed in mathematics, and he believed in the new, and he created accordingly. But he was at bottom a humanist, and if you listen to his music, you'll understand he transcended technology completely. That's why people talk about the mystique or the magic aspects of his music. He used the determinism of numbers to create an indeterminate music with cosmic longings. And there is also mythology there, you know. He was a complex man and a poet at heart, in essence. And he probably loved children. At least this picture seems to say so, no? Now, this is, I'm glad I have this picture because this is from La Tourette. This presentation is atypical kind of for me because it's, I advocate you know, disorder to an extent, but today is really a meandering, zigzagging. But I'm glad I came across this picture. This is from La Tourette because I was always intrigued by these arches. You know, they seem to be designed by a drunken Le Corbusier or a drunken Iannis Xenakis. Why would they design them in this way if we can use the word design, you know? And I hope I have another picture. I have other pictures of La Tourette, but I was shocked when I was there. I couldn't believe it. And I think if one would do in an architecture school something like this, would receive a very low grade, talking about grades, you know, because these are not classical columns. They are not even, you know, the common, you know, arches. Now they almost seem to be cartoonish or kind of like architectural jokes. Why would they do them like this? I ask myself, why would they do them like this? Why did they do it like this? Maybe because, I don't know, maybe as the mystics say, we do not see things as they are, we see things as we are. So maybe in this way they wanted to show the fragility, actually, you know, the indeterminacy, the imperfection, the fragility of on which maybe often faith is placed. I don't know. He also had a role here, I understood, because these are somehow musically, I don't know the theory behind it, but I understood that Le Corbusier allowed Iannis Xenakis to have these mountains here, which are, you know, on the side of a corridor from which you can access the cells where the monks have their rooms. Anyway, this is La Tourette. This is more the creation of Le Corbusier, apparently, than Iannis Xenakis, but he had a major role here. And you saw that picture in their office where he was some kind of a, you know, chef d'atelier, so to speak, in Romanian, considering his, you know, position in the picture. An interesting building too, La Tourette. I mean, just try to imagine working for a number of years with and for Le Corbusier. He was probably a very difficult man, I mean, most surely. But look at another very curious thing here, and I don't know, this was Le Corbusier's idea or Iannis Xenakis' idea. Here is a corridor that has on one side the rooms of the monks, but this building is placed on a hill with a beautiful landscape around it. You know, you can see far away. He blocked the view. Well, in this case here, okay, there is a concrete wall, but this happens in various situations. Also towards the outside of the building, he blocks the view. And I ask myself, why? Because you move towards the window, but when you arrive here, you can only see the sky. You cannot see downwards. You cannot see the the land, the trees, and so on. The only possible explanation I found was that perhaps Le Corbusier thought, or maybe the monks asked him to do so, not to invite towards the sensuality of nature that surrounds the building, but on the other hand, these monks were able to exit the building. No, in fact, they are buried there. I saw the little tombs on the hill in the proximity of the building. So I don't know, it's very, very strange in a way. It's this shield, of concrete panel that obturates the view from this opening, because there is a window here, but you can see, except you can glance at the sky. These are also a little bit militaristic, these skylights. Anyway, back to, you can see it's very disorganized, this presentation. I should be a little bit unhappy with myself, or even ashamed. But sometimes I see values in zigzagging, not to have a linear discourse, but fragmented, contorted, zigzagging. Talking about zigzagging, this is the building also connected to music by Lipskind, the Jewish Museum in Berlin. And this is a page with which the project was published. And Lipskind himself, he declared he was some kind of a virtuoso. I think he said I'm not sure, the violin or the piano, but I think it was actually the harmonica, accordeonul, because I saw pictures with him as a child, but maybe he changed the instrument later on. Anyway, he was and is still involved with music. In fact, he said that he could have had a very successful career as a musician, as an instrumentalist. I'm talking about Daniel Lipskind, but exactly because he felt that became too easy for him, because he was a virtuoso already and he couldn't grow beyond that, he chose architecture to challenge himself. Back to the Philips Pavilion. This is a nice presentation board for the Philips Pavilion. I really love it. I mean, look at the plan and look at the elevation and look at everything. It's a creation which is both rigorous and indeterminate and free. Back to the corridor of La Tourette. By the way, of La Tourette, I never had a mystical experience in a bathroom. I never contemplated bathrooms. I am against the mysticism of hygiene. But I have to tell you, in this building by La Tourette, besides the liturgical space, the so-called church itself, what impressed me the most was the public bathroom, because I slept a night here and I took a shower in that bathroom. I have to tell you, I don't know exactly what it was. Very arte povera, very simple, in a way minimalistic. The pipes were exposed and painted, in different colors, like red and green. I remember in the shower room, even if I was blind, I had the feeling I could have placed the soap where there was something to support it. I could have hanged my towel in a place which was meant for it. I don't know, it was something, I hesitate to use this word, it was something very magical. At least that's how I perceived it. So again, if you arrive at Lyon, if you go to visit La Tourette, please, if you can, spend the night there, and please try to take a shower in the public bath. And you'll probably understand then what I try to convey now, maybe not in a very inspired way. Anyway, I understood the rhythmicity maybe is not so obvious here, but he placed these vertical elements you see in a sequence which is capriciously musical. I mean, the spacing could have been the same, but indeed, if you look at it, you see a certain so-called capriciousness, which is somehow musical, and it could have been very different. Even these horizontal elements, you see, they are placed. Maybe he calculated their positioning, I don't know. They seem to be capricious, but maybe they were based on some kind of harmonic or disharmonic relationships that have to do with mathematics and music. Construction of the Philips Pavilion. This moves me to these two men. We do not know their names. We do not know where their centennial was. Probably never, no one knows or will know, you know. But we have to think of them too, you know, because the building could not have come into being without these anonymous people. And I think they are important. Architecture is indeed a collective work. Someone has the conception, but the conception is not enough. You know, in order to build a building, you need many people, many resources. And yeah, that's why I say that actually a building doesn't have just one beneficiary. It's not just the person who pays. Everyone is a beneficiary. The builder is a beneficiary. The architect is a beneficiary because it benefits from having the occasion to build a building. The passerby is a beneficiary because he sees, perceives the building, takes pictures of the building. Maybe everyone, maybe even the gods in the skies or on Mount Olympus are beneficiaries of a building. So we shouldn't be indifferent. This was not built by, I don't know what this is actually. And I don't know why I placed it here. As I told you, this is a problematic presentation, but we are still a La Tourette. And here is this Iannis Xenakis? It might be. It might be Iannis Xenakis. Le Corbusier looks taller at his 71 or whatever. I don't know. No, he was maybe a little younger because La Tourette was built before the Philips Pavilion, or I don't know, around that time. The monks, they, as I said, they were buried here, you know, on this piece of land on the hill. This is actually a good idea, you know, but we cannot do it for the large population of the world. People to be buried in the courtyard or, you know, under a tree, in the garden, if they have a garden, and so on. What is this? Villa Mash. I come back to, I'm glad I have a few more images. Please be patient, we'll end very soon. I only had 100 images. So this is how it's called. He built it by himself, I mean, just him, without Le Corbusier. Villa Mash on this island in Greece, 1966, 1977. And I hope I have also a view from the top, because I have seen or a plan. Yes, here it is. It's not very clear, but it's still very interesting in a way, with these several buildings that together create actually a house or the villa. This was built by Iannis Xenakis. I think a few more images we have and we end. I'll end with his own picture, his own house. Now, as opposed to our obsession with huge surfaces of glass in the name of a complete union with the exterior, you see what strange openings into the walls he chose to have here. As Frank Lloyd Wright said, there's nothing wrong with architecture if there wouldn't be, well, he said two things. One, nothing wrong with architecture except the architects, and the other one, nothing wrong with architecture except, you know, making making architecture would not be difficult if it wasn't necessary to make windows or openings into the walls. Well, it's true that these kind of openings into the walls that Xenakis decided to do are unusual. He might have had a reason to do them like this, and I don't know that reason because I didn't read anything written about it. I hope I have also an image or two from the inside. Yes. Why not? It's possible. Now, I don't know exactly what's going on that table, but yeah, it's interesting that configuration with the windows. Now we look at the Xenakis house, his own house that he built in 1996, much later, for him and his wife, and I think their daughter. Here it is. Well, more so-called classical, than compared to everything we saw by him before. This also says something, maybe it's the old story of the shoemaker who makes shoes for himself. I don't know. He was also older here. He was a few years before he died, so 70 something. Anyway, Le Corbusier died at 78. And I think, but he died while swimming. Xenakis, I think, died at 79. So this is his house somewhere in Greece. Now in Corsica, actually. I was wrong. So in Corsica, 1996. Yeah, because his wife was French, and not excessively musical, this house. But the stair, that wooden part, is rather interesting. I like that wooden part, fragile as it is. Maybe he ran out of money. He didn't have any longer money for concrete there. But I like the difference, so to speak. The almost vernacular kind of stair there that you wouldn't expect on this kind of concrete structure. And here it is, Iannis Xenakis, living with his wife and maybe their daughter too, in a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful landscape, yes. But he didn't live for too long there. That's it. I mean, I have a few other things here relating to architecture and music, but I'm not sure I should tire you more than I already did. Thank you.